I'm Hannah Holcomb, and welcome to the Counseling Corner. Hello, everybody. I'm Hannah Holcomb, and this is Josh Nichols, and this is the Counseling Corner. And I am a licensed professional counselor candidate here at Family Solutions. And I have today Josh Nichols with me. And do you want to say a little bit about yourself,
Sure.
Introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Josh Nichols, and I am a licensed marital and family therapist, also a therapist here at Family Solutions, and kind of the, producer of, I don't know if that's what we call it. I don't know if we've reached that status.
Yeah, you are. You're the producer of this. This was Josh's vision, and I got really excited about it too, just to have a space that we could share with people, tips for parenting, books about parenting, activities to do with kids, just a kind of a space to talk about children and parents.
Yeah. So let's talk about how this began.
Okay.
And then we can kind of talk about the concept of it so people
Yes.
understand what your show is going to be about. And I apologize for my voice. I am kind of losing my voice a little bit today, but I'll do the best I can.
Yeah. So
Clear my throat.
how it began as far as the videos?
So we did, my colleague Carrie and I did Recovery TV Live for a few years, and we kind of ended that in a sense and kind of branched out. We have like the 3 shows now, so we changed the name of our show to Therapist Take, and which we did last week. And when we're thinking about, having who are we going to have for these other shows, you're one of the first ones that came up because you were a guest on for Carrie on Recovery TV Live, and if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to go watch it because we talked about surviving the holidays. Right. And it was just a really good experience. So when Carrie got back, I was like, Hannah's really good at this, and so what if we ask her to do her own show, and it kind of went from there, and trying to figure it all out, and it kind of evolved into the concept of having your own thing, but where you're going to try to schedule guests. So you'll be the only show that out of the 3 where there are regular guests on the show to talk about certain things related to their expertise, basically. So,
which I'm super excited about that, to get to have different people come on and them kind of share like specifically what they're passionate about, what they've studied within the field of like children and parenting, because so many of our play therapists here at Family Solutions, they work specifically with kids, but even under that umbrella of kids, everyone has specific things that they're really skilled at and really passionate about. So I'm excited for those people to get to join me over the next several months.
Yeah. And just to be clear too, you correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's not a show that's going to be just about parenting, although every show could or should, I don't know, appeal to parents maybe.
Yeah.
Because parents are the architects of their homes and families, and so hopefully, as hopefully no kids are watching this, really.
Right. Yes.
I don't think we're going to drop any F-bombs or anything on here anyway.
Probably not.
But it's geared to the people that can understand what we're throwing at them.
For sure. So. Yes. So it's not exclusively for parents, but also not a show your kiddos are going to watch. So this isn't the Disney Channel, even though I love Disney. So
yeah, of course.
Yeah, Disney.
Yeah, I don't know why we wouldn't love Disney. And if you don't love Disney,
I know some people that don't love Disney.
That in the comment section, it may or may not get deleted. But depends on what Disney program you're knocking. We might have to delete it.
Yes, for sure. Okay, so today we did think it would be fun to discuss some of our favorite parenting books, maybe books we've read and used in our own homes parenting, or we've suggested to clients to use with their kiddos. And so I actually don't know the books you chose. I think you kind of like secretly know what I chose.
Well, no, I don't think it's secret anymore.
Yeah.
That was the idea, but in my effort to hunt down one of the books, I was in here. I actually went to like all our therapist office. I'm so glad people didn't walk in. I think you did walk in on me in someone's office. But I really wasn't like, I was just trying to find, because I was going to all our play therapists, like this particular book, I listened to it on Audible instead of purchasing the hard copy. But I was like, surely someone here has this book. So I was in here, I said, can I look for it on your shelf? And then I noticed it down on the stack because she also chose this book.
I did choose it. Yeah. So this one's The Whole Brain Child. And if you're, really this can be outside of like if you're a parent. If you work with children in any way, you're a teacher, you're a therapist, or a babysitter that interacts with young children. I feel like this is a must read. And it really helps describe like the neuroscience of the brain and children's brain development and what their behavior means and how we interpret that and what we do with that.
And it's The Whole Brain Child by
Dan Siegel. And I think the co-author, Tina Payne Bryson, she co-authors with him.
Make sure we give her credit too.
Yes, she needs the credit too.
Yeah. And so, and of course, Dan Siegel is kind of a rock star in our field, so most mental health professionals know who he is, and he's got more than just that work too. So, but let me tell you what, since this is the mutually agreed upon book that we both selected, our one overlap, I'll tell you what I like about it. And I actually had the thought when I was reading it that everybody should read it regardless. And I'm sure there are books that might be better for adults to understand how their brain works and things like that. But what I like so much about this book is it takes you through the developmental stages, what the brain is doing at different developments of a child's life. And maybe I'm just a mental health nerd, and I'm a big nerd when it comes to the brain. Then I'm like, everybody should read this book, But I did find it fascinating in where even if you don't have kids, I think you could benefit from understanding how your own brain developed over the course of time. Yeah. And that, I think for me anyways, it really impacted my approach with my own kids and just in general on how I understand the brain. I have a great story for you too. I don't want to.
Well, okay. So my favorite part is this is like the greatest, I feel like, analogy for kids and for parents of understanding like our upstairs brain and our downstairs brain, and like the prefrontal cortex, which is what controls our reasoning and our thoughts and our decisions. And sometimes kiddos, when they're having those difficult behaviors or those tantrums, that's not the part of the brain that's activated. It's their downstairs brain.
Well, tell people what the downstairs brain is, so understand.
Yeah, downstairs brain would be like your amygdala. That's like the science word for it, but that would be more of like your emotions, your feelings. When you feel threatened, that would be like your flight, your
fight, flight, or
freeze.
Right. So it's like the survivor brain. So I think Dan Siegel describes it as like your downstairs, like he calls it downstairs brain because it's like the downstairs of your house. It's got all your basic functioning for survival, right? You got your sink and your refrigerator and your bathroom and everything that you need to survive is usually in the downstairs part of your house. And the upstairs brain, which was what makes us human, is the more sophisticated part of your home. Is like it's the luxury, it's the perks. If you have an upstairs. I do not have an upstairs, but we have some perks to our house. And it's more about getting the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain communicating with each other. I think that's one of the misconceptions is people that, I need to get into my child's upstairs brain, which is kind of true, but it's more about getting the two communicating with each other, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like he uses that, even the picture of like your downstairs is up here and your upstairs up here. And then when kids get really overly emotional, sometimes we'll say like they flipped their upstairs brain and they can't, they can no longer regulate. So even just asking them a thinking question can kind of calm their nervous system back down and regulate those emotions to get their upstairs brain kind of activated again.
So Hannah's using her hand because she's doing something that I think, actually just recently learned this when I was doing EMDR training, that they call the triune brain. And so basically, this is like your brain stem right here, and then this is the middle of your brain. So if you think of your brain like in these three parts, your brain stem, middle of your brain, and then the top there is your neocortex, which is the part that makes us human.
Yeah.
But the brain stem, I always think of the brain stem as like the plumbing of the house. So I don't think he says that in there, but it's like it's all the things you can't see. It's really vital to the functioning. So it's, you know, it's your electricity and the plumbing and things that are in the walls and really vital. And then you got your downstairs brain, your survivor brain, you know, right here, and those two are working in sync with each other to create safety for the individual, right? Yeah. And then what makes us human is that we have that neocortex. So when you see Hannah going, she's not trying to be ready to punch me out over here. She's doing the trying. Right?
Yeah, and we have a nice diagram in the book if you choose to. I think we have a link in our in the description, so you can like actually click the link and buy that book. But it's a really good one.
Yeah, we'll make sure we put links to all these resources and maybe even more in the comments on Facebook or in the description of the video on YouTube. So it depends on where you're watching it right now. Yeah. So, but yeah, so let me tell my story real quickly.
Tell us your story,
and then we'll move on to the. I'll do one. Well, we'll get there. So the story is that when I first read this book, my oldest son, was probably 6-7 years old, and he probably more so out of my other two kids would get into his downstairs brain, and when the kid is in their downstairs brain, you cannot reason with them. Like, and so if you're working with, if you're like, man, this kid just will take so many consequences. Like you pulled their door off their room and you stripped their bed and they have nothing, and they're like, what is going on? Well, the chances are they're in their downstairs brain and you can't reason with them. It's all about survival at that point. So he's extremely stubborn. His downstairs brain was powerful, and so I actually just used the language because he's also really smart and he likes neat and new things. And so I just told him, I was like, hey, you know what's going on in your brain when that happens? So I waited until he was kind of back to his regular self, and I was like, you're actually in your downstairs brain. I was like, we often think of our brain as left and right. But you have an upstairs brain and a downstairs brain. And when you get your downstairs brain, I can't talk with you. I need you in your upstairs brain. And so I'm going to start telling you, when you get like that, I can't talk to you when you're in your downstairs brain. And I'm not lying, like that. That doesn't work with my other two kids. But with him, it really resonated with him. And when he would get into that mode, I would just tell him, like, hey, bud, you're in your downstairs brain right now, and when you get in your upstairs brain, I can talk to you more about this. And he would work really hard to regulate and get up. And so it was really cool just using that language, which I don't necessarily think Dan Siegel was expecting people to use that language with their kids, but it worked with him. So.
And remind me how old he is?
Now?
When this happened, when it was going on?
I said 6 or 7. As I got to talking about it, it was somewhere around there. Somewhere between 6 and 9, probably.
Yeah, so he probably thought that was really neat, getting to learn about that. And
he was old enough to understand conceptually, but still young enough to where it was an extremely powerful part of his existence as a child. So
yeah, I love that.
He's 15 now, so.
Yeah, probably gave him some power over what he was doing. And
yeah, I loved it.
That's awesome. Okay, so for the next part, do you want me to introduce another one? It definitely ties in. So this one is like by the same author. Do you want me to go ahead and do that? Okay. It's your stuff. I know you have yours waiting. You're locked and loaded with yours. I
can be a dominant personality, but I don't want to take over what you're doing.
Well, so this one is also by Dan Siegel, and honestly, I feel like they're both must-reads, even if people just read the first 2 chapters of this one. So this is called No Drama Discipline, also by Dan Siegel. And it really pulls in the power of connection with our children. And it's so great. We have the knowledge, right, of the brain and helping our kids learn how to regulate themselves. Like you said, giving him that language kind of helped him understand, okay, I need to kind of come back down and have some peace and calming. But oftentimes with our kiddos, something they really, really need, especially when they're having challenging behavior or acting out or in the middle of a tantrum, would be that connection piece where they really need to feel like you're here with me, you're supporting me, you're loving me. And so this book really illustrates that, how you can be that supportive person, be connected, but also still hold really firm boundaries and hold high expectations, right? It's not passive. It's not, oh, like we just let them do whatever and we love them through it. It's, I love you, I'm here for you, your feelings are okay, and I also expect you, you know, to do these things, and you're not alone in it. So this is a great one too. Great.
So in all honesty, I haven't read that one, but it almost feels like this one is more like science nerdy.
Yes.
And this one's like got more practical elements to it, maybe.
Lots. This thing, I'm like, I have it starred, I have it underlined.
You're not reselling that one.
No. I like to have like tangible copies of my books for me. Yeah. Okay, so you're ready. What's yours?
Yeah. So this was hard to do because there's so many good ones. But there are so many terrible ones too. Maybe we should do one on
the worst parenting books ever. Yeah.
But this one has been has been my favorite parenting book for a long, long time. It's called Scream-Free Parenting.
Okay.
Yeah, and you're looking at it like you haven't even heard of it, have you?
I actually haven't heard of it. But tell me more.
Okay.
I'm intrigued. I want to know more.
So it, by the way, it's by an author named Hal Runkle. I believe it's not printed on this one because I think I got this copy before, but I think it is a New York Times bestselling, like old Dan Siegel over here with his New York Times bestselling stamp. So I think the image that you might see on your screen is what the current cover would look like, but this is the original. But this is definitely a very innovative view of parenting, which I would agree with him, he kind of talks about that parenting is, most parenting books are written about the kids, you know, how to have a good child by Friday or something weird like that, you know, which just the title of it, I have not read that one, but just the title itself is kind of like squeamish a little bit, like, you know. One thing I love that he says in here, that, you know, I don't know if he said it in here, if I heard him say it, because I've listened to him speak before too, that, you know, if parenting were about kids, we'd be kidding. Right? So parenting's about parents. And so it's not asking the question, how do I get my child to behave? It's really focused on, like, how do I want to behave when my child is misbehaving or when my child is doing this? It's not about the kids, it is about the parents. How do I want to respond in the most effective ways and with a larger goal and purpose in mind? It is, and if you're a therapist nerd watching this, like we are, it's very Bowenian based.
Ooh, yeah.
It is based in Bowenian theory. So if you're not a therapist watching this, you probably don't know what we mean by that, and you probably, to be honest with you, don't care to know. But if you are a therapist and you love Mary Bowen,
then you want to buy it.
Then you probably you might want to read this one. So
that's great. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So I love that you are talking about it's more about the parents themselves than the kid. And so 2 of these I brought have nothing to do. They're not labeled parenting books. They are. That one is It Didn't Start With You. And it should be on your screen. Mark Wolin, I think how you say his name. And this is all about like inherited family trauma and how things that happen either to us as even to our parents or their parents can drastically affect our responses and our reactions to things. So just like when we're saying when children, when their upstairs brains kind of go offline and those emotions are triggered, this is similar to in parenting if we tend to want to react by screaming or by getting upset. it's usually an indication of actually like what's going on within us and what's happening, and trying to address those things. I always say, like, you need to be in therapy. I'm a therapist, so even healthy people need to be in therapy. So it didn't start with you is such a good one to identify your own patterns of like, why am I so triggered if my child is whining, or what is it about their behavior that is causing me to become dysregulated, and what do I do with that information?
I have response to that, but I don't know if I should wait for you to get to the next one.
So this is, similar. The body keeps the score. Again, I feel like this is a really good one. It can be triggering if you've been through certain traumas, but it's a heavy read. It's not one you're going to like take to the beach and want to relax and read. But it also is such a great book to understand how our own trauma and things we've been through really significantly impact our parenting and the ways in which it's challenging and how it reflects more of what's going on with us.
And an added benefit to that is the author's name is very fun to say.
And Josh wants to say it for us, right?
Bessel van der Kolk.
Yep.
I love it.
Yes.
So very popular book in the mental health world too, just so you guys know. And I'm really glad that you brought that to everybody's attention, because we would probably be much better parents if we didn't have to deal with our own stuff. I think that's true for everybody. And I think of the quote, "There's no use crying over spilled milk," right? And which is usually kind of a reference to a child crying over spilled milk. But how many times have you had the metaphorical spill in your home, and you reacted in this very big way? So a lot of times I think it's the parents crying over spilled milk, right? And when you kind of take a step back, you go, why am I making a big deal if my kid spilled a glass of water, spilled a glass of milk, or they dropped something, or they're like, why is this getting me all stirred up? And sometimes those feelings are warranted. I'm not saying they're not, but I think it's worth investigating for yourself to understand what's happening within your own body and within your own mind and your own history with this, that, or the other, so that you can kind of start working to change the narrative in your own family.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what, in this, it didn't start with you. There's a part where he says when those reactions, kind of get triggered, it's almost like someone just presses the rewind button really quickly, and you are reacting not necessarily out of, maybe it didn't warrant that reaction. Maybe it's a lot less about the milk that spilled and something much bigger going on.
What I love about this book, the title itself, "It Didn't Start With You," is very compassionate and towards self and forgiving of self. And really, it almost implies, I have not read this one, but I'm very intrigued. I want to read it. But I'm willing to bet that there's some element in here of you letting yourself off the hook.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right? Okay, I'm just saying.
So even the first part of the book talks so much about how, and this again, I'm like such a nerd for this kind of stuff, and how early on in like development, you are having experiences long before you are actually in this world having experiences, like in utero, and how even the things your mom goes through during her pregnancy. So things that maybe you didn't even choose or didn't even experience and have memories of, but that can still affect you greatly. And so yes, it kind of goes back to say, hey, sometimes you might not even be able to say, oh, this is why this bothers me so much. So it really takes that whole family lens of even beyond you and your parents.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay,
what's your next one?
It's my last one.
Okay.
This is called Nurture Shock.
Okay.
I can't even remember. It's been out for a while now.
I've never heard of this. Okay. I've never seen the title.
2009.
Never seen the book cover.
Not super old, but this is just a really good read. By the way, this is one you could read at a beach, and it's a page turner. It's fascinating in that what the authors are doing is that they're taking a deep dive into some of the more common practices among parents in our culture with children, and they're asking the question, like, things that we think works, does it really work? And sometimes it does, but maybe not like we think it does, in the ways that we think it does. And they examine, like, for example, do violent cartoons or something like Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote type things. These type of things create more aggression in children. And I hope I don't butcher this, but whereas there's you're going to have a group of people that think no, it doesn't do, and some groups like yes, it does. Well, the reality is that, if I remember this correctly, is that it does create some level of aggression, at least significant enough to kind of register in the research that's been done on it. But so do PBS stories, PBS programming, because what they were saying is that they spend a lot of time setting up the conflict and very little time with the resolution. So by the time the resolution comes around, you think about children's attention span, they're already kind of done with it. So they get a lot of consumption of conflict, even in PBS programming, or at least the old stuff. I don't know how they do it now. And with their very low resolution. So it's not more what they get from like Roadrunner and some of that type of programming. It is not significantly more than what they'd get from watching a PBS program. So I mean, and if anybody goes and reads this, and if I go back and read it, I might have remembered that completely wrong, because I did not review that before this. But it was definitely one of the more powerful stories, and this book's just full of them.
It makes me really want to read it.
Oh, it's fascinating.
I will say PBS Today has some Daniel Tiger and he's so good. He's like the modern day Mr. Rogers.
Well, he is Mr.
Tiger
Rogers
version. Right. So I feel like that's really interesting. I love that, and I love that it questions some of our things that maybe society, especially Western America.
Oh yeah.
Society says this is what you need to do. You want your kid to behave and kind of be quiet, which is maybe a really short-term solution, but is it raising kids that have that intrinsic motivation of I make the right choice because it's the right thing to do and it feels good. And I can get really fired up with especially living in Oklahoma and things that are considered acceptable, and really challenging that. And so these books, I would say, if you're questioning that, all of these books would be great resources to read and kind of understand how what we do as caregivers and people in children's lives significantly impact them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I have one last one, which this is like, I feel like this book like truly could tie all of these together. So have you read it? It's The Connected Child by Karen Purvis. Okay. And so this book was originally like written for parents who were adopting children and children coming from hard places. Maybe they had been in orphanages, or maybe they've had extreme like neglect or abandonment. And so it really focuses on how to connect with children, how to form that attachment when maybe they've came from a place that did not have that. And the great thing about this, though, is I tell teachers and therapists that it's not just for those kids from hard places. This should be what we do for all kids, not just because they're from a hard place, right? So specifically like doing gentle parenting and kind techniques, right? That should be allowed for all kids, not just for kids that have had a hardship in their past. But she really, again, focuses on connecting with kids, disarming their fear so they feel that felt safety, so that part of their brain does like just kind of calm down, so they're not in the fight and flight freeze mode. They can have some rational thinking with it. So it's a really good one. I want you to read it. Okay. You read this one and I'll read those. How about that?
That sounds good. Yeah, I haven't heard of that one. So
She's who is the name behind TBRI, which is like trust-based relational interventions. Yeah, sure. And so in the therapy world, we use her a lot with kids, needing to.
Yeah, so if you see that credential or that service, it's offered. TBRI stands for what?
It stands for trust-based relational interventions, and it's really instead of like a therapy modality, more of an intervention, but very, very recommended with kids from trauma.
You'll have to have a guest on to talk about that. That's
Speaking, Nancy will be my next guest next month, and she does Theraplay, which TBRI and Theraplay kind of go hand in hand.
You don't want to miss that. You don't want to miss the interview with Nancy.
Yeah.
I hate it when I miss conversations with Nancy because she's always so busy, and she's always got really powerful things to say. Yeah. But speaking of the connection and everything, we did. I had these quotes prepared, one from Hannah, one from me, that we find ourselves often saying to people, and I meant to send them to the other Hannah, who is over here behind the scenes, who's throwing up all the graphics on the screen, and so we can give a big shout out to her and a thank you for all that she does, because she does a lot of work on this too. And I forgot to send them to her so she can put them on screen. But let's talk about them anyways.
Yeah. Okay? Absolutely. Mine is very brief and simple. It's just connection before correction. So making sure we're with our kids in any setting, really making sure we have that connection piece. So what does that look like for practical terms? I tell parents all the time, I'm like, hey, even if it's just like 10 minutes at home where you put your cell phone out of sight, like where you're not going to check your text, you're not going to check your email, and you are on the floor playing with them. That's obviously if you have little ones, but doing something that communicates to them like they care for me, they love me, they're here for me, and making sure you have that piece before you can really go into the correction piece, because we want our kids to have mutual respect for us and us to them, and that helps.
I think it also appeals to their survivor brain, right? Like you kind of, like if you kind of think of it as they have a protector that stands guard, protecting the most vulnerable parts of them. You got to convince that person to let you in before first, right? And that's kind of that connection piece. So I really like that. And that really kind of fits really well with my quote.
Yes.
Mine is stemmed out of, and I think something that you learned about me recently is that when I first got started, I did a lot of parenting stuff. In grad school, my thesis work and my clinical focus was heavily on parenting and the parent-child relationship, and I even did a seminar I created for years. I haven't done one in a while, and so it's kind of that kind of really captures what you just said, the premise of that seminar. So it's very relational focused. Like if you don't build the relationship, it doesn't matter what you do next. Like, I mean, if you want to have a chance, whatever goals or aspirations you have, or dreams that within reason, obviously, that you have for your children, the things that you value, if you the best chance you have in instilling that in them is to make sure you have a relationship with them first.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of what you're hitting at. So my quote says that I can't remember exactly how I wrote it, but I'll do the memory version.
Yeah.
Which is that the parent-child relationship is the relationship. Oh, sorry. The parent-child relationship is the first relationship we enter into in this life. And it's the relationship where we learn how to do relationships for the rest of our life.
I love that. So good.
So a lot of what we do in therapy sometimes, especially with adults, not so much with the little ones, because Hannah's job with working with the little ones and the parents is kind of helping them, modify, orchestrate, whether it's starting from ground zero and creating the whole structure from with very little to go on or something like that, or if it's kind of taking what they've already created and just kind of helping them further develop it. Whereas for me, someone who sees adults, a lot of times we're kind of undoing a lot of things from the past, you know. And
absolutely.
So you can mimic almost the parent-child relationship mimics almost every type of relationship that we get into in our life.
Yeah.
You know, there's hierarchy there, so like we're always under a hierarchy usually in our lives. So whether it's we're in school and it's a teacher-student relationship, or we're grown and we have to deal with government or officials or a boss.
Yeah. Those bosses, yeah.
It mimics friendships. You can be friends with your kids at times, right? It's a great relationship to hone in on and mimic, and to help them understand how friendships work. And there's also intimacy in that. Like we have things like, I just did a daddy-daughter dance with my daughter, or my wife has these little mom-son dates, you know, type things, or they should have these mama-daughter dances, dad-son date, whatever, you know, things to mimic. There is intimacy in that relationship with the child. Obviously, you know, I think it's important to say this out loud just so nobody's confused, because a lot of people think of intimacy and their mind goes somewhere else. I'm not talking about that.
Right.
I'm talking about just a loving connection with your child that is special.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people, when they go and they do enter into relationships where there is a different form of intimacy, that doesn't usually start there. They're looking for, you know, their brains are gravitating toward how they were treated.
Yeah.
Often by their caregivers.
Yeah.
So.
And that's our goal as caregivers, as therapists, as parents. We want those kids to feel trusted, to feel safe, to feel supported. And how can we do that? Yeah, we can connect. We can learn about why they are acting the way they are, and make sure we are kind of in check, so we can be that calm, regulated presence for them. And then I would like to add too, right, this is so much information, and if you're watching this, and maybe, I know like me and like all moms, sometimes you're like, it's just too much. Like, I'm a terrible mom. I can't do it all. It's overwhelming. I think the power of also, like, you can always go forward. You can always change. You can always do something different. So if you've heard any of this, if you can today go, I want to try that out. I want to try to connect more with my kid. And also like the power of being able, when we do make mistakes, because we are humans and no parent is perfect, to say to our kids like, hey, you know what? I'm sorry I reacted that way. Do you forgive me? And like just being a human with our kids and apologizing.
I tell people all the time that I'm so thankful there's no such thing as perfect parenting. How else would our kids learn the art of apology? How would they learn what humility looks like? You know, if they don't experience that from us, you know, to be able to say, I'm sorry that happened. And learning that it didn't start with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is important, you know, and that if you're watching this, or you got a library full of books like this, terrible parent probably isn't the right adjective to describe you, you know. And so
definitely not.
Yeah. So, and the other thing I wanted to say about, you know, like I said, we're going to have links to all these books. But something I feel like is important to remember is that if you notice, like Hannah does this for a living. She's got a bookshelf over here that you can't see, full of books. You know, she didn't read, you know, The Connected Child and go, this is it. This is the one. You know, I mean, so when you, if you like something an author says, that's great, and apply it, but really parenting and parenting styles are tailored to every single family in its own unique way. So it's your job to tailor that. And so the more information you can gather, you know, by reading all these books, or listening to podcasts, going to therapy at times, watching a wonderful YouTube and Facebook broadcast.
And recognizing, like you even said, what worked for your son didn't work for your other two. What works for one child is probably totally different than from your other children, which is so hard and confusing that they're different.
And did it really work?
Right.
I thought it did.
Yes, yeah. Who knows? We'll see. I always tell. I just was telling Carrie earlier. I was like, it's really freeing in parenting, knowing. I just am like, you know what? They're probably going to need therapy for something I did or did not do, and that's okay. There's something like a freedom in knowing like no one's perfect, and we try our best. We try to be there, be supportive, be loving, be someone they can trust and go to. Have that connection, apologize when we mess up.
Absolutely. And I could talk about this forever.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure we're out of time. So thank you for being here today, being a guest on the Counseling Corner. Next month.
First one.
Yeah, the first one. I appreciate you being willing to come and join me and talk. So yeah, next month it'll be Nancy, and she'll join me, and we'll discuss some more things related to counseling and kids and all the things. So
most of the time there's there will be a live broadcast on. So next week Carrie and I will be back with a therapist take, talking about something unique and specific to our culture, and then we have our unit session with Josie and Mary, and then the therapist take kind of comes in between those. But I think we're taking a break during spring break. There will be a couple weeks that we miss, but usually every Friday at 12:30 there's going to be a broadcast.
Yeah, so thanks for watching, and we will see you